What is up, Tube users? I am the Stereotypical Gamer, and welcome back to another installment of Overwatch 2 Heroes, an in-depth guide. Today, we are taking a look at a hero who, in my opinion, is the hardest hit scan hero to learn, but is also the most fun to play, and that is Ashe. Let's dive right into things and talk about her primary fire. Ashe's primary fire is the Viper. This is a semi-automatic rifle that deals 40 to 12 damage depending on the range. The damage falloff for this weapon starts at 20 meters and reaches its minimum damage at 40 meters. Unlike most weapons in the game, Ashe has to reload each bullet individually for this weapon. If her ammo is fully depleted, it can take almost 3 seconds to fully reload. While the damage is not great for this primary fire, it does have a faster rate of fire at firing at almost 4 shots per second, which can be helpful at close range. Ashe's secondary fire, however, is definitely better for dealing with foes at longer ranges. Ashe's secondary fire for the Viper allows her to aim down sights and deal more damage from further ranges. The damage while she's ADS is 75 to 22.5 damage depending on the range. The falloff for the secondary fire is also longer than normal, starting at 30 meters and reaching its minimum damage at 50 meters. While the damage and falloff range are increased with the secondary fire, the rate of fire suffers substantially with her weapon, firing at only 1 shot just every half a second. It's also worth noting that Ashe receives a minus 25% movement speed penalty while scoped in. Now, let's move on to talk about Ashe's first ability. Ashe's first ability is Dynamite. This is a thrown projectile that deals an AoE explosion damage plus burns enemy targets that are caught in the radius. The area of effect for this ability is 5 meters. Enemies caught within those 5 meters take 50 to 20 damage depending on their range from the center of the explosion. Plus, they take an additional 100 damage over 5 seconds. The explosion for the Dynamite triggers 2 seconds after landing, but can be activated quicker by shooting the projectile. The burn effect can also be dealt to enemy equipment and barriers. One good thing to note about this burn effect from Dynamite is that it can be cleansed by Kiriko's Suzu and Zarya's Bubble, but can also be self-cleansed by picking up any health back. Now, let's move on to talk about Ashe's next ability. Ashe's second ability is Coach Gun. This is a shotgun-like projectile that deals knockback to Ashe herself and enemy targets that are in front of her. The maximum damage for a Coach Gun is 90 if all pellets hit the target. This damage is pretty minimal, especially considering the spread of the pellets. This ability is more useful as a movement tool for Ashe. For example, she can fire this ability straight down to get some height and take high ground areas quicker. She can also fire it behind her to propel herself forward to get to where she needs to be quicker. Or she can use it to fend off enemies trying to contest her high ground. Those are just some useful ways to use this ability. Now, let's go over Ashe's ultimate ability. Ashe's ultimate ability is Bob. This ability sends Ashe's Omnic sidekick charging forward up to 70 meters away. If any enemies are caught in his charge, they are flung up into the air and take 120 damage. Once Bob charges an enemy or runs into a wall, he starts firing at enemy targets with his arm cannon, dealing 14 damage per shot. Bob will usually target enemies that Ashe is targeting. Bob also counts as an extra player and can contest points and objectives. Bob can also be targeted for healing and can be nano boosted by Ana. While healing Bob does not increase ult charge for any supports, a Mercy that is damage boosting a Bob can gain ult charge for the boosted damage. Now that we've gone over all her abilities, let's dive in to see which heroes counter and are countered by Ashe. Ashe sort of plays like a Widowmaker but with better utility. She plays well from range, but is really only a threat when she's hitting her shots and is terrible at close range. A tank hero Ashe plays well against is Junker Queen. With Ashe's good damage from range and escapability with her Coach Gun, plus Junker Queen having no way to stop Ashe's Dynamite, this matchup is definitely favored for Ashe. A DPS hero Ashe plays well against is Cassidy. Ashe just has an edge over Cassidy in terms of the range game, and with Ashe's bigger burst damage potential thanks to her Dynamite, this tends to be a good mashup for Ashe. Finally, a support hero Ashe plays well against is Ana. Ana tends to play in the backlines, but with Ashe's high damage from range, she can easily pick off an enemy Ana from her own backline. Now, let's move on and talk about the flip side of things and see which heroes counter Ashe. While Ashe is a great hero at the mid to far ranges, she doesn't do that great against enemies at close range. A tank hero that can disrupt her at close range is Winston. Winston is one of the best tanks for diving at vulnerable targets. Because of this, he can easily dive onto an enemy Ashe's position and take her down with relative ease. A DPS hero who plays well against Ashe is Widowmaker. While both Ashe and Widowmaker are similar at being great heroes at long range and not so great at close range, I think Widowmaker edges out the long range capabilities of Ashe. Widowmaker's one-shot potential is easier to hit and therefore more deadly than Ashe's burst potential. Finally, a support hero that plays well against Ashe is Kiriko. A lot of Ashe's damage in ult charge comes from well-placed dynamites that ignite multiple enemies. This can be countered fairly easily with Kiriko's cleanse. That plus Kiriko's high damage from similar ranges as Ashe makes this matchup difficult for Ashe to overcome. Now that we've gone over some counters for Ashe, let's dive into some tips and tricks. One of the hardest burst shots to get a rhythm down with Ashe is her double shot. Basically how it's done is you fire an ADS shot, then quickly unscope and fire again. This allows you to get 2 quick shots off before you would be able to just aiming down sights regularly. It's also a good way to quickly burst down targets that are around half HP. For Ashe's Dynamite, you always want to be pre-igniting it basically every time. Because of that 2-second timer when it hits the ground for it to go off, enemies will usually notice it and be out of the way of it if you just let it go off on its own, and you really won't get any value from it. So you always want to try and be pre-shooting it. And it seems like it would be difficult because it is a small projectile, but it's actually pretty easy thanks to the way that she throws it. Basically, it lines up with your crosshair by the time you throw it and the animation's done and you aim down sights. It's perfectly in your line of sight as long as you haven't moved your crosshair at all. I think one of the most important parts about Ashe's kit is using her dynamites effectively. You want to be trying to ignite as many targets as possible because that's your main way of building ult charge, is from the fire and burst damage of your dynamite. Ashe is also a hero that benefits significantly from the DPS passive. For those that don't know, the DPS passive for DPS heroes in the game is an increased reload speed after kills and I believe some increased movement speed. But really what we're looking at here is the reload speed. It is substantial for Ashe since she reloads each bullet individually. It's always good after you get an elim or help assist an elim or anything like that to reload because your reload speed's increased and that's your main downtime when playing Ashe. Now for Ashe's ultimate when playing on control maps or defending on escort maps, I like to have Bob on point. That way he can contest, and just usually given the situation it's best to have him on cart just to have that extra person that's there that you don't have to really worry about, and he's 1000 HP so it's going to be hard for enemies to take him down quickly. But if I'm on attack or I'm playing a payload where the points should always be moving for the most part, it's kind of hard for him to contest those points. So usually what I'll do is I'll try and go after heroes at that point and try and land them. It can be a little bit difficult to get that charge from Bob and get that 120 damage because he is summoned to the right and in front of Ashe. So you kind of have to be aware of how he's summoned and how he goes forward. It's a little bit wonky to get used to at first. And for Ashe's Coach Gun, it's best to be used as a mobility tool. I don't think I've ever intentionally used it as a damaging tool because it is so good for mobility. It's really good at getting to high grounds. It's really good at just getting out of spawn quicker. And it's really good for booping enemies off of your high ground. So those are really the tools I use it for. I would never, ever use it for damage. But that's all the tips and tricks I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like if you did. Comment any other tips and tricks you have for Ashe. I would love to hear them because I'm still learning this hero and I'm having a lot of fun playing her. And definitely hit that subscribe button. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
That rhythm.